whatever. Inflation has come down very nicely in the last year, right? So you're losing buying power. Remember, nowadays people say, yeah, he was right, and he was right. What will the Fed do in June? Right now, after the Fed minutes came out, traders have said that they think there's about a 72% chance that the Fed holds still, no cut, no increase of rates. Now, remember why they increased rates. We had massive inflation, right? The way you increase massive inflation is basically an increase in the cost of everything, right? So if they increase rates, there's gonna be less money circulating out there going to fewer and fewer items, which puts the demand lower and keeps prices at bay. That's the big key here. Now, the hard part about inflation is when we have such a good labor market, as in terms of low unemployment, a lot of people are working and they have options for work. So they can leave a job for a much higher pay or even a little bit higher pay very, very easily. And that is inflationary as well. So right now, though, if you've seen, inflation has come down very nicely in the last year. Very, very nicely. We were sub 5% in the last report. That's a big win for a lot of people. I don't care what anybody says, raising rates did work in terms of keeping down costs. Now, obviously, oil prices came down and things like that helped significantly, but you've got to remember that the whole idea of raising rates has worked from the naked eye. Now, I'm not going to get into the little nitty-gritty details of things, but it makes sense. If they want to spur the economy, they're going to lower rates so more people spend money, borrow money, expand their business, buy stuff, high-ticket items, things like that. So right now, the question is, are we going to have cuts soon? Are we going to keep the same? Or are we going to keep going up? It appears, according to what a lot of people have written about, is that the hawks on the Fed, the people who want to be more aggressive with increasing rates, are still running the show right now because we still have inflation above the Fed's goal of 2% per year. We're still a little bit under 5%. Now, my personal opinion, and this is my personal opinion, it doesn't bother me to have inflation. Inflation helps a lot of things. Now, the problem is fast, quick increases in inflation do hit average people very, very fast, and that does suck. But over long periods of time, slow and steady inflation can help a lot of people. I don't buy into. Now, granted, is it an invisible tax essentially? Sure it is. If you think about it, if you have $10,000 in a bank account, next year, that thing's only worth at 3% inflation. Essentially, it buys $9,700 of the previous year's goods, right? So you're losing buying power. It's essentially like a tax, but not a tax, right? But you don't actually write a check to somebody. You just lose purchasing power, which is essentially the same thing. But what will the Fed need to do in order to make these decisions? Well, they're going to look at all the data coming out. They want to wait for jobs data. They want to wait for GDP data. They want to wait for a lot of things to take a look and see, are they going to cut? Are they going to keep the same? Are they going to increase? I don't think cutting is in the question right now. Unemployment's too low. The economy is still growing. I don't think this is, they're still worried about going back to inflationary times. I don't think cutting, and plus, like I said, there's inflation still not where they want it to be. They want it to be at 2%, they said. So if you want it to be at 2%, you got to wait for things to slow down. I think a big way that'll happen, and there is some talk, remember back in April, when the banks were starting to fail, there was worry about a recession. My personal opinion is, behind closed doors privately, I don't think the Fed would be opposed to a recession. And the reason being is, and they asked Chairman Powell in the Senate and House committees how much a recession would affect people. And his comment was exactly spot on. Inflation affects everyone. A recession would affect people who lost their jobs, but inflation affects everybody. And that's the big key there. When you're a middle-class family with a household income of $50,000 or $60,000, if your goods cost an extra $2,000 or $3,000 extra in a year or $5,000 extra in a year, that hits you very, very hard, very, very quickly. Because it takes a while for your job to start paying you more. It takes a while to see those things, yet when the suppliers of goods have an increase, they can pass it on very quickly depending on where it's from. Like gas. Oil prices go up, that gas price is going up very quickly. That's what you got to remember. Food prices go up, that comes out very quickly. Why? Because food's a quick turnaround. And that's what the Fed needs to balance. I like the fact that Chairman Powell said inflation affects everybody poorly. Unemployment would be bad for a group of people, but we have to look at the whole right here. And that's what he's going to be focused on. Now, I used to criticize Chairman Powell when he was under Trump because I thought he should have raised rates back then, and he didn't. He got bullied into cutting rates, and then COVID happened, and it really did a big job of cutting rates. whatever. That's all done now. But I like the fact that Powell is being more aggressive now and saying, listen, we need to do this. We need to keep inflation down because it affects everybody. Back before COVID, even before all the money, we had no inflation. It was 2%. It was nothing. They were like, listen, we're fine with this. We're fine with this. Then all of a sudden, get easy money checks being written. Remember, when COVID happened, they were paying people $600 a week to stay home. How hard is it then to get people to come work for you? They could be like, well, I'm making $600 a week staying home. You got to pay me more than that. That's inflationary. Because then the products and services that those people were hired to make and do, now the costs go higher. And what's an owner of a business going to do when their costs are higher? They're going to pass it on to the consumer. That's inflationary. You know, I always hear, we talk about this, higher wages, this is great. There is a ripple effect for higher wages. It means inflation. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It just doesn't work in this world. And the Fed has to balance all of these things together. I do not envy Fed Chairman Powell. I would not want that job. He is on, back in the day, Fed Chairman was, you don't hear what he says, you just sit there and wait. Now it's literally the meeting is over. He's on live television answering questions. It's just like, of course he's going to have a fear of doing something that's going to make people upset. They're going to blame him. Paul Volcker in the early 80s raised rates like crazy. And people at the time criticized him, not as many as today, not as fast as today. But guess what? Nowadays, people said, yeah, he was right. And he was right. And I do think that Fed Chairman Powell will come out as being correct in raising these rates. Did it cause some issues with banks? Yeah, a few banks went under. But they were also mismanaging. You can't sit there and not wear a seatbelt and then get mad when you get severely injured in a car accident saying, well, that person hadn't hit me. Well, you should have been wearing your seatbelt. Because random things do happen. Fed Chairman Powell's job was to keep prices low. The Fed has two mandates, price stability and full unemployment. You've got to remember, full unemployment does not mean 3.5%. Their goal is between 5 and 6% unemployment. That's the level in which you start to say, okay, it's not going to be as inflationary. We've just been very spoiled by unemployment that we've had sub 4% for several years over the last 20 or 25 years. That's kind of unheard of. That's very difficult to have. You know, during the great financial crisis, unemployment, I think, hit 10.8%. During COVID, I think the unemployment rate was like 18.5 or 20%. And it rebounded very quickly once we opened our doors back up again. But these are the things the Fed has to consider before you go criticizing Fed Chairman Powell and before you go defend him. Just remember, there are a lot of things to consider. There are tens of thousands of data points. The reason I choose to defend Powell is because I look at it from a very high level. If we have higher prices still, I think he has said before, I would rather over-increase interest rates and make sure inflation comes down than not be aggressive enough and have it keep going up and up and up. I don't think we're Argentina, but I don't know if you guys saw, Argentina raised its rates like 97% because of their massive inflation rate. 97% interest rates. That's incredible. That's insane. We're sitting here complaining because interest rates are 5 to 5.5%. I just saw that the 90-day Treasury is paying 5.38%. The last time I saw this morning, guys, that was 0.06% just 2-3 years ago. 5.38 versus 0.06%. All right. So if you have cash now, you know it's funny. I was sitting on cash for a long time, but now I'm getting a decent return on my cash. I'm like, okay, it gives me all the more incentive to just sit there and be patient. I'm getting a pretty decent return on my cash. I'm getting 5.25, 5.4%. Okay, I'll sit there and wait. I'll wait for stuff. Now, when interest rates were 0%, you would look at the S&P and say, well, I'm going to make 1.5%, 2% from investing in the S&P. Might as well do that. I didn't believe that. But now at 5.25%, I will gladly wait things out, especially considering 5.25 is above the inflation rate now. Inflation's 4.8, 4.9. All right, I'm not losing purchasing power either. And I'm able to do other things like sell cash secured puts on stocks at lower prices to be able to make a few extra percentage points on that cash. So my 5.25 can become 7 or 8% just by sitting in cash, waiting for stocks to hit the prices I want. Guys, this is the channel for you. This makes sense to you. And it's just allowing you to think a little bit different instead of attacking the Fed or whatever it is. And trust me, I attack plenty of people on this channel, but I do think Fed Chairman Powell is doing a good job looking at the entire market, looking at the entire country and doing what's right for the whole and not just one individual. from the economic policies they're putting into place, I do believe they should. Of course, I have a bias, but I think they should keep rates. I think they should keep rates the same or raise them. I'd prefer a raise of rates because I think we had artificially low rates for too long, and it made the exuberance of the market irrational, just to borrow a phrase from 25 years ago. So if you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the channel. The vast majority of people watching this channel come back and watch more. We're very unique in that regard. So thank you very much for your time.